What's up, TAC? It has been way too long since we've had an episode on here, and I hope you all know that I definitely am sending you all the love and hoping that wherever you're at in your journey, things are cruising right along. You're learning, you're growing, you're reflecting, you are continuing to ride the path of exploration, mastery, and continuing to learn on this amazing journey of chiropractic. I have had a wonderful first year in practice. I'm coming up on my annual review here in early September, and I'm not 100% sure where the Artful Chiropractor is going to go, if there's a time, or if it is the time to pivot and explore something else, or if it's run its course. I'm not really sure just yet, and thank you for bearing with us, and hopefully some of you can still get the update that this episode's coming out. I know iTunes will ask you if you want to keep downloading the episodes or whatever, so you may not even get the notification for this one since it's been so long, but I definitely couldn't finish or even have a proper stopping point without getting to my mentor, Dr. Rick Swecker, and it is so fitting to be the 100th episode to have him on. He is the person who really inspired me to go to chiropractic school, and you're going to hear all about our journey together, our story of how I came to the curiosity of wanting to know more about chiropractic in the sense of, why he chose the chiropractic path after really being with him and being under his care for quite some time. So I think you all will really enjoy this episode, and thank you for bearing with us. And I'm sure we will have something a little bit more in terms of clarity around the future of TAC, or whether it's going to pivot, or maybe whether it's just run its natural course. But there is still a deep desire to connect with all of you and connect with this amazing profession through this avenue of podcasting. I just don't know exactly how it's going to look at the moment because I'm diving into practice, diving into a podcast for our office, but I still have so much love for all of you and the commitment to this podcast. I know many of you have listened for quite some time, so just want to express my love and my gratitude, and I hope you all enjoy this episode with my mentor, Dr. Rick Swecker. Dr. Rick Swecker, welcome to the Artful Chiropractor Podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Ray Daniels. It's great to be here. I'm excited for this.
Me too, man. It has been a long time coming, and I think I've said that a few times on some episodes, but we've been working on getting this scheduled for a long time, and knowing how far back our friendship goes and just your influence that you've had on my journey through chiropractic, it is pretty surreal to sit here and after 99 episodes have you be number 100. It's pretty fitting, and it's funny how nervous I was to interview you, the one that got me into this whole thing. So I'm excited to have you on, man.
Well, I'm such an intimidating presence. I mean, why wouldn't you be nervous?
I know, right?
Yeah, and my office is a whole 3 feet away from here, so it makes sense that it took us so long to get this scheduled.
Right, and I've only been here since September of last year.
Yeah, I think we're running out of excuses.
Yeah.
But I just want to say how honored I am to be here and to be a guest of yours, because although I know in our relationship I've kind of taken on the mentor role through the years, I look up to you as a human being, as a chiropractor, and just marvel at all that you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. But yet, getting to know you over these last 14 to 15 years, it's not a bit surprising, because I know who you are at your core, who your innate being is, and what you're capable of doing. And so it's been an awesome ride to sit back and watch you fulfill your destiny. I've enjoyed every moment of it, so I couldn't be more excited to sit in your presence and be in this seat right now.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that, and it has been an amazing ride for sure. And that's kind of why I want to kick things off, I have often thought about over the years, like just your interactions with me when you were taking care of me, and I was going through high school and then I was getting into college and I was really interested in physical therapy and going down these roads, and not once did you ever try and like push it on me that I would be a really good chiropractor. And I can see both sides of it, but for whatever reason, like that was exactly the influence that really impacted my journey. Because I think we've talked about it before, whereas if you were like, oh, you should go to check out chiropractic, you should do this, you should do this, that might have changed our relationship a little bit. But it wasn't until I became curious that you really shared with me the story and the philosophy of chiropractic that really inspired me. So I'm really curious to see just the headspace around that, to have, and where that kind of viewpoint came from.
I never stopped and thought about it, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way to approach this. I think there's an innate way, and thankfully, I bonded with you at a very early age, and because of that, I loved you. I loved our relationship together and cared for you. And because of that, I always felt like I could be authentic with you. And that's the authentic way that I would approach a situation like that. If I had tried to influence you to be a chiropractor, that would have been unauthentic for me. That's just not who I am. In my being, the way I approach life is, I really believe very strongly that everybody has their path, their lessons they have to learn. They have to make their choices and learn from those choices. And who am I to get in the way of that? And there are certainly times when I do take a stronger role and try to influence something, but that's usually when I'm not being an authentic version of me. The authentic version of me is someone who allows things to unfold as they may. And as happy as I am, and I cannot express that enough, that you are a chiropractor today, I'm even more happy that I did it the way I did it, and that I was true to who I am and true to our relationship. Because you're right, who knows if I had approached it differently, how that would have affected our relationship, and maybe it would have pushed you away from being a chiropractor. Who knows? I mean, but at the bottom line is that because you and I had such a great relationship, I felt like I could be myself with you, and I still feel that way to this day. And I think that's why it unfolded the way it did, and why it became such a real experience, a real interaction between us, rather than something that was fake or forced.
Right. And that was really powerful, just hearing you talk about that and how you were just living authentically to, your truest self as a chiropractor. And over the years of getting to just see you practice that way, take care of people that way, be in the office, be in your presence, it was that what I was drawn to, instead of maybe the words that you were telling me or talking to me about chiropractic and all these different things. It was like who you were being on a day-to-day basis that really inspired me when I was having that moment of crisis to figure out what I wanted to do. It's like reflecting back on, I'm like, all right, who in my life is like living really authentically, loving what they do, taking care of people, and then I immediately thought of you. So it was like never really so much of like what you were saying. It was just who you were being on your day-to-day interactions with me, which is, I look back and I think it's just so cool.
I think there are people who are innately influencers.
Right.
And so they have the gift of being able to show people a way. That's not my innate gift. I'm definitely somebody who thrives on deeper connection with people. And I really feel like that's how it evolved between you and I, is that we were just given this opportunity to really get to know each other on a really deep level. And thankfully, that is one of the ways that I communicate best with somebody. And so I think because of that, it just naturally unfolded the way that it was supposed to. And honestly, if you'd never asked me a question, I think the day probably would have come where I like sat you down and said, hey, let's go talk about this thing a little bit before you make this decision. But that day never came because, you and I built such a great relationship, such a great bond that I think you felt comfortable enough to ask me the questions. But then the reason why I thrive better in that situation is when you ask the question, the curiosity is already there, and so you're going to listen to what I have to say.
Right.
And that's just the way that I personally operate better.
Yeah.
And so, again, it has nothing to do with the right or wrong way for this to do this. It has more to do with, just being true to who we are, who our innate beings are, and true to the relationship. And that was a relationship that you and I had.
Right.
And like I said, I don't know that it could have unfolded any more perfect than it did.
Yeah. And I think that's the attraction. You bring up such a great point. I think in school and in chiropractic, we find these polar viewpoints of how you need to be. You need to be an influencer, or you need to be this, versus with your situation, you've just developed and evolved in just expressing just exactly who you are and whatever that looks like. And then that becomes super attractive for the people that it needs to be. So that's a great point for our listeners, because I think we get caught up in how we're supposed to show up as a chiropractor. We need to fit a certain box, when so much of it is just your authentic self is going to be exactly who you need to be.
Yeah, you don't need to be an influencer. You need to be genuine.
Yeah.
You got to be the most genuine version of you. That's what people are going to be drawn to, because as healthcare providers, as healers, as chiropractors, what people need above all else is connection and trust. And if you're being something different than who you are, that's going to come across in an inauthentic way, ingenuine way, and people aren't going to trust that. So, first and foremost, people have to trust you. They have to trust that you care about them. And if you're trying to be something you're not, then you're focusing on trying to be that, not on that person in front of you. So you're not connecting with them. You're not caring about them. You're caring more about yourself in that moment, not the person across from you. And so it's so important. For us to influence somebody, they really have to know that you care about them. You have their best interests at heart. And there are certain people that express that by influencing, high energy, high expression. But there's other people that don't. And for them to try and be something that they're not, it's going to come across in a very unauthentic way, and that's going to push people away, not attract them.
And I think with people with different personalities and different ways of expressing their genuine self, that's a great tool. Not a tool, but it attracts the people that need to find you. So, and especially if you're being something that you're not, trying to fit in a certain box, and maybe you're trying to be the more expressive type and the outgoing, the extrovert, and then maybe you attract some people who like that, but like you said, there's going to be that barrier of trust over time, because you can't put on that facade of it being inauthentic, and then you're actually missing out on the people who are needing just your genuine, authentic self. And maybe that is a less expressive and just connecting more on one-on-one basis. So that's what I've always loved about chiropractic. I think it doesn't matter the type. I think it's more of just, can you be your authentic self?
And on the other side of that, if you're forcing yourself to be something that you're not, you may be able to sustain that for a while, but it's going to exhaust you. It's going to wipe you out. It's going to take all your energy. It's going to take you way out of balance and make you really unhealthy long term. And that's going to show up one way or another, physically, mentally, chemically. It's going to eventually be the death of you if you don't honor who you are and stay in your integrity, and then stay in your balance and live in the growth and repair rather than fight or flight. When you're being something you're not, that's stressful. That's fight or flight, and you can't live there. You can't sustain there.
Right.
Some people can do it better than others and longer than others. Eventually, it will catch up with you and exhaust you.
Right. And you, especially when you're trying to take care of people, that is very not sustainable at all.
No. And why would you want to live that way? And that's not a happy life. I mean, ultimately, the reason why you want to be a chiropractor is because you love and care people, and ultimately, selfishly, you want to be happy. And, you're happy caring for people. But if you're being something you're not, that's not happy. That's not a good existence. So why would you want to do that?
Right.
If that's the case, be something else. Something that is truer to your innate being, so that you can be happy. I mean, above all else in this lifetime, we should find our happiness, find our bliss, find our peace.
Right. So, I mean, we've already alluded to it quite a bit of this genuine, authentic self, and just knowing you, and even the conversation we had yesterday about our strength finders. Like, I don't think you have done a ton of maybe this self-improvement work, or reading a ton of books, or you did do a lot of seminars in school, but there's almost this innate guidance that it seems like you've lived your life, through this point right now, that it's really allowed you to do this work, but almost from like an innate level, not trying so hard external to read these books and do these routines and do these different things. I'm curious to what the influence, or maybe who influenced that with you, or was that just something you've innately had over the years to just trust your gut and who you are and express that way? If that question makes sense, kind of.
It does make sense, and you're absolutely right. I've never sought out a lot of external self-improvement resources. However, from the day I was born, being who I am, being very introverted, I'm constantly looking at myself and evaluating myself and judging myself in every action that I make. And so that self-improvement work has been every minute of every day for the last 45 and a half years. And so, while it may not be actively searching for it the way other people do externally, the internal work is constantly happening all the time. And it's something I honestly can't even get away from. I think probably just in the last couple of years, I've found more peace with that than I've ever had through some of the things that we've had through the expression, through the other podcasts that you and I have done together, and doing some more active work. And probably the biggest thing that's always gotten in my way is being too internally driven, too introverted, and not expressing it to others. When you express to others, that's when you learn so much about yourself. Is having that connection with others. And that's one of the beautiful things that chiropractic, beautiful gifts that chiropractic has given me, is that connection to other people. Because to be a successful chiropractor, you still have to be able to connect. And whatever way you do that, right, you've got to be able to connect to other beings. And when you're as introverted as I was in my youth, became very sheltered, put up a lot of walls, disconnected from the world around me. And chiropractic gave me that opportunity to step out of that walled comfort zone, which was really uncomfortable, honestly, in its own sense, and forced me to reestablish those connections with people, with other beings, and really chiropractic above all else has allowed me to improve myself more than anything else I've ever been a part of because of that. Give me the gift of learning how to share myself with others.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. When you're talking about those first questions, it's not about how you share, it's just the fact that you are sharing yourself with others. You're willing to connect to somebody else authentically. And that's the key.
When you talked about the walls that you had in chiropractic, allowing those to kind of break those down and begin that journey of sharing yourself with others, I imagine the challenges that came with that. If you've had however many, 25 years, I forget, when did you get into chiropractic school?
So in 2000.
Okay.
So we're borderline 20 years now. Nice.
So, that transition, and that's a lot of our listeners are kind of at that zone. And I imagine the ones that are really outgoing and they're expressive, and that may be an easier journey as long as they're staying true to their authentic self. But like the people who have found that spark and are in chiropractic, but maybe they're just getting into starting to serve, and there's that contrast, right, of that introspective, that introvert, and now they're playing with the waters of sharing who they are with people. What were some of the best things that helped you with that transition?
Man, that is a good question, and I will do my best to answer that. Because it was a long, slow process. That is not something that happened overnight, for sure. I think, honestly, probably the truest answer is repetition. Being thrown in a room with somebody over and over and over again, and having to learn how to connect with them and just doing it.
Right.
That's where the doing fed the being in that sense. But probably the biggest change is just when you're in that situation with somebody, and that you are responsible for taking care of them, and improving their lives, improving their quality of life. You have to be willing to understand where they're coming from. And so that was the biggest thing, is probably shifting it from it being about me to it being about them. And as soon as it becomes about them, now a lot of those fears and walls go away. And it's really just a question of, okay, how do I understand them better? What's necessary for me to understand them better in order to care for them? And it just comes down to really being willing to be present and pay attention. Being willing to present and pay attention, and then the sharing of yourself comes so much easier, because then when they know that you care about them,
right,
they immediately start to care about you. And when somebody cares about you, that takes some of those walls down.
Right.
And so being present, paying attention, and caring, I mean, those are probably the three biggest things that evolved over time.
And I imagine did you ever have moments of like, oh, am I gonna get through this? Like, what, like, was it always that confidence, like, okay, like, this sucks right now, like, I'm struggling connecting with people, but I know that if I just keep going, like, I'm gonna continue to get better?
Yeah, it probably happened an hour ago. There are still opportunities every single day. There's certain people that I just don't connect to as well as I want to, and I judge myself every time that comes up. So I think it happens less and less. We have these opportunities in life that we face. The first time you face it, it's really challenging to adapt to it. The 10,000th time that you face it, it's a lot easier to adapt to it. 10,000 times easier to adapt to it.
Right.
And that's, again, one of the beautiful things that chiropractic has given to me is the number of patients that I see over and over and over again. These opportunities come up all the time for me to learn how to express myself better, to care about the person in front of me better, to share a connection with that person, and to actually take the next step, which is to help in the advancement of improving their quality of life. And so the more often you come into that uncomfortable situation, the better you adapt to it each and every time.
Yeah. And we've talked on this podcast before about how it's not necessarily maybe what you're doing with people or the adjustment. It's like, of course, we want to train hard at what we do, but so much of it has to do with the person you are showing up with, the people that you're taking care of. And that's what I've been able to see with you, like getting under care with you for so many years, but then having the contrast of like getting into chiropractic school and seeing other chiropractors and going to seminars, and then coming back, and I'm like, man, Rick, still, I mean, you're seeing, I think you on average like 250 a week to 300 for like majority of your career. And like watching that, I'm like, okay, like I don't know if he's like doing something that's like so different, but like the presence and the caring and your connectedness with people, and even if you're with them 3.5 to 4 minutes, it's like, it seems like a lifetime. And that's the strangest thing, I think, trying to learn and just watch with you, that people feel so cared for in such a small amount of time because of this presence and this caring that you've developed, that you can really serve a lot of people at that high level for so long.
Yeah, if you ask me the question, what's the key to your success? Why do you see so many people? I'd honestly tell you, I have no idea. I really don't. It still baffles me when I think of how many people come to see me. And there's a lot of times when I don't know why. I can't even answer that question. But I think if I have to analyze it, I think you're right. I think for whatever reason, all this this inner work that I've done throughout the years and challenged myself over and over and over again, what it's built up is this ability to connect with people. And I think it came from being so bad at it and having to work so hard to get the other side of it, that somewhere along the line, it got better. And, obviously it must have been innately there at some point. And then through this process, I was able to unlock it, because for a long period of my life, I was terrible at it.
Right.
And so that would be the only thing I could say, is that for some reason, in that short period of time that I have with people, I am now able to connect with them really well. And I think that's probably the only key, because I don't think I'm the best adjuster in the world. I don't think I know the most. I'm not the most intelligent person in the world. I'm not the most expressive person in the world. Definitely not the most outgoing person in the world. So I don't know what the one key is, other than for whatever reason, people trust me. And I think it comes from a genuine connection with them, where they sense that I truly want them to be better in that 3 minutes that they have with me.
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to say, just circling back to the trust. Like, for whatever reason, people can be in your presence, and just the years and years and the moments of the struggles of doing that internal work, that like they just build up. So now when someone sees you, not only are they getting like this present version of who you are, but they're getting the years of the inner struggle and the inner work and the inner evolution. So in a moment's time, like I think their subconscious recognize this trust, like this intuition. They probably can't even put it into words, but there's that's something that they experience when they're with you that allows them to and get better and evolve and have a great experience with you.
I think also too, the fact that I show rather than tell. I walk the walk. Everything that I'm telling them is what I do in my own life too. And so I think it comes across in one way or the other, even when I'm not trying to express that to them. They sense the fact that this is not BS. This is the real deal. This is what I'm telling them is the same thing that I would tell myself, my kids, my family, or what I'm doing for them is the same thing I would do for myself, do for my kids, do for my family.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just brings in that integrity piece, right? And especially with the pillars of health, the way we're moving, thinking, recuperating, moving, eat well, move well, think well, recuperate well. All those, you have value for all of those, right? You're really aware of what you're putting into your body and how much you're moving your body, and just like the spiritual practice and the yoga practice and the mindfulness, like you are in integrity with all of those different facets. That I think that is a great point that you bring up, that people, like, you are in integrity with all these different areas and your relationships with your family and your partner and your wife, and it's so awesome to see that. I think people pick up on that, and that's it instantly builds trust, because it's not only are you telling me what to do, this is what you do. And I think that is a missing piece of integrity with a lot of healthcare professionals and chiropractors. They're not walking the walk, and there's just a lack of trust with that happens with that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And that, I kind of want to transition to that, talking about being in integrity. You're one that, when I first found out, you didn't love doing screenings, and you didn't, when you were building the practice in the beginning, you weren't sacrificing necessarily your relationships with your kids and your family. You really held a pretty hard line from the beginning, in my understanding. I'd love to have you kind of expand on that a little bit.
Well, unlike a lot of people, I had a full-fledged family before I got into chiropractic, and they were my heart and soul. They were my priority. They were my love above all else. And so one thing is, I've always had very clear priorities in my life, and my family is number one across the board. In all situations, they come first, and which is part of the reason why we look down at our shirts and it's family first chiropractic. That's where that stemmed from, is family means everything to me. And so when I got into the business side of chiropractic, and there are time constraints on it, the one thing that I always knew is that in order for me to live my life in a way that was fulfilling, I was never going to sacrifice my connection to my family and for the business side. And if that didn't work, then I had to find something else to do. Mm-hmm. And so it made it really easy, because I've always known that regardless of what I'm doing, that I will never sacrifice my quality with my family, my time with my family, because that is always my first priority.
Where were those roots so deeply ingrained in you? From the beginning, over time, like just to have that sense of your values is uncommon, I would say. And a lot of people have to work on it, especially with the imbalance within chiropractic. You get out and you're like, all right, business, business, business. I have to work hard now to set myself up for later, when you're maybe compromising relationships, people, friends, hobbies, different things in between.
I think it comes down to just being true to yourself again. I mean, for me, that was always what I loved, but that doesn't mean that that's what everybody's priority should be.
Yeah.
Certainly there are a lot of people who love work, and that's the most important way that they express themselves in the world is through their work, and they should be true to that. Mm-hmm. Somebody who loves working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, they should do that. That's what they should be doing. Dr. Cliff is a great example. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm successful is because I partnered up with somebody who brought great balance to me. In the beginning, Dr. Cliff, Cliff Fisher, who started, it was Fisher Family Chiropractic before I joined. That was his love. That was his passion. That's how he expressed himself to the world, was by working his ass off every single day. And he would put in 14, 15, 16-hour days, because that's what he loved. That's what he was called to do. Mm-hmm. And if he sacrificed that to be something that society said he should be, right, then he would be less happy. And same thing for me. For me, it was the opposite. If I was working 15, 16 hours a day and not spending time with my family, I would be super unhappy. That would not be a true expression of what makes me happy, of what my innate gifts are, what I'm drawn to do. And in chiropractic, we preach innate all the time, and so that's what we should do too. Yeah. Listen to our innate. Listen to that voice inside us that's calling us to be ourselves. Because above all else, we should be the truest version of our being, and then do from that place. Right. And that's what brings us true happiness, which is a sense of peace, a sense of bliss.
Yeah. And that ties right into some of your practices that have allowed that type of expression. What has been so much fun is doing this spirituality podcast together, and I think that would be just an awesome little segue into talking about your routine a little bit, of how you are checking in with yourself in the morning, and how that shows up on throughout your day. And I look at the high volume that you're seeing, and just the managing people and the team, and it's looking at it from my perspective, it can be overwhelming. But just knowing that what the work you have done, that internal work, and then those check-ins every single day allows you to serve at such a high level and stay true to your authentic being. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
So I think probably the good way to start would just be, I've used the word happy, peace, bliss a lot. And for me, there's a big difference between the Western definition of happiness and what I view as bliss or peace. Happiness is typically tied to something external, and it's contrasted by something that's unhappy. There's kind of a yin and yang relationship between being happy and being unhappy. And so when we're happy, it actually can take us out of balance. It can take us out of a place of peace, because whatever it is we're attached to that's making us happy, and this can be great things like our family. I brought my family a lot. So if the family is what brings you happiness, that's something that can be taken away from you at any moment. We are not guaranteed to have that family with us for always. And so when you don't have that family, when you're separated from that family, when you're at work, let's say, that now you're the opposite, and now you're unhappy, versus peace, which is when you are at peace, not because you are attached to something external, but because you're connected to your internal being, fully connected to your internal being. And so when you ask about a routine, when I'm most at peace is when I get up in the morning before most of the world is awake, and I go for a walk, and it's quiet. And then during that time, I usually walk about 4 miles, and it's a little over an hour. And so I have that full amount of an hour and a half and 4 miles to just connect to my being without any external stimulus and really be at peace. And when I do that, it really sets up the day to flow in a great way. And during that time, I often remind myself to, like you said, pay attention to the fact that I'm at peace during that time. And then, all right, what are the things that take me away from that throughout the day? And so when these things come up, uncomfortable situations, whether it's a patient interaction that doesn't go the way that I want to, or a team member interaction that doesn't go the way I want it to, or my wife does something that makes me unhappy, in those moments that take me out of that peace, to also take a second to pay attention to understanding what it is, what am I attached to in that moment that's allowing me to be taken away from that sense of peace that I had, when I was connected to myself. And the more times that you pay attention to that, the more times you come up against the same situations, the better you are to have a good response to that, rather than a poor reaction to it.
Right.
And by no means am I perfect at this, but I definitely set the intention to pay attention each and every morning that I go on those walks. And then there are times when I don't have that hour to go for a 4-mile walk, and so instead I'll meditate for 20 minutes. And I do the same thing. I really set that intention to pay attention throughout the day to what is it that takes me out of peace, and not judge that as good or bad, but just understand it.
Right.
Understand what it was about that moment that took me out of that place of being peaceful.
So much reflection, and like you said, it continues to build upon itself. I think like you can respond more from a truer place, I think, when you experience those same stimuli that used to cause you to react, or maybe it caused you to react for a longer period of time. Like the more you do it, it just seems like that muscle gets stronger, and you catch it earlier. You don't hold on to that story for as long, and you like recenter. So that's just again an awesome practice for people to just constantly doing your best to like be into that state of peace, and then noticing when you're going out of it, how long it's taking, and over time you'll be able to catch yourself, and it won't be as much time in between, I think.
And another way of putting it is loving yourself unconditionally versus conditionally. I think what's happened to so many of us in this existence is that we really base the love of ourselves and others on what we're doing or what they are doing, which is conditional. Because no matter how good you do something, there's always going to be someone else who's doing it better, or a time when you're not doing it as good. And so if you're attached to that condition, then there's going to be highs and lows, which takes you out of peace. The high takes you away from peace just as much as the low does.
Right.
Whereas unconditional love, unconditional connection to yourself, that is not dependent on any doing. It's not dependent on any externals. That is something that is available to us all the time. And so when you say work on that muscle, and I don't know if you said it in this podcast, but I've heard you say before, the trust muscle, work on the trust muscle. Yeah. For me, working on the trust muscle is working on that unconditional love / connection to myself, and valuing myself based on that, not on external conditions like being a great chiropractor, being a great father, being a great husband. Those are all judgments. Those are all standards that can't be lived up to each and every day. I mean, look at Tiger Woods or LeBron James, right? So the Tiger Woods, who used to be the greatest golfer in the world and was on top of the world, and if Tiger, and I don't know if he did or not, but if he attached his happiness to being the greatest golfer in the world, then now he's probably really unhappy because he is no longer the greatest golfer in the world.
Right.
You know, LeBron James may still be the greatest basketball player on earth, but if he attaches his happiness to being the greatest basketball player, someday someone's going to be better than him. And when that day comes, now he's going to be unhappy. Right. But if he bases that being on being connected to LeBron James, the being, nobody can take that away from him ever.
Right.
You know, and even our physical lives, that can be taken away from us at any moment.
Right.
But if we are eternal beings, which I hope that we are, I expect that we are for this life to even be what it is.
Yeah.
You know, there's an essence, there's a being to us that can't be taken away from us by anything, anyone, at any time. And the more connected we are to that, that's true happiness. That's true peace. That's something that's based on being, not doing. And that's what I try to connect to when I go for that walk, or when I sit and meditate, or lay on my back in savasana and sometimes fall asleep. But the intention in those moments is really to find that place where I'm connected to that part of me, that being that I am, that essence that I am, that nobody else can ever take away from me, including myself. I can never take that away from me.
Right. And this is super important for, obviously, I think every single person, but especially chiropractors. You know, just in our profession, we can all relate to it, just the highs and the lows that you can experience from person to person. And again, if I'm attached to the outcome of what's happening with the people that I'm taking care of, it's like riding this crazy roller coaster. And by the end of the day, it's exhausting because you had so many highs and so many lows. And it was very easy to conceptualize this, you know, with earlier podcasts and talking to people. I'm like, oh yeah, let's just not be attached to it. But when I'm in it now, coming up on a year, 10 months, it's like, whoa, I really get to see like the resistance of seeing person after person after person after person, and having the opportunity to let go of the attachments of certain outcomes, because I can only imagine over an entire career what that can do if I'm attached, rather than, you know, staying connected to the essence of who I am.
You are exactly right. There can be a big difference between self-esteem and self-love, unconditional self-love. Mm-hmm. I went through this just recently and had a huge realization of how much my self-esteem was based on externals. As you know, we just went through getting out of insurance, getting out of network with insurance companies, going to where we're almost 100% cash. I went from seeing 300 people every week, sometimes 330, 350, feeling really good about myself because of that, to having weeks now where I'm seeing 200. I've lost a third of my patients over that time, and that really affected my self-esteem. And I didn't realize it. I didn't realize how conditional me as a chiropractor was on my numbers until I had that drop. And that was eye-opening. It was humbling. It was really humbling to see, all right, I really am attached to this idea of being a great chiropractor. And a lot of my happiness comes from this, and it's based on this standard of this arbitrary number of seeing 300 people a week. And that's what makes me happy. And it's been such a great experience to have to look at myself through the reflection of not being a chiropractor, seeing 300 people a week, and seeing that attachment that I had, and going through the process of okay, self-reflection, looking in that mirror and saying, okay, is my values, how I value myself, is that dependent on me being a chiropractor that sees 300 people a week? And can I love myself as a chiropractor that's seeing 200 patients a week? Because if I can't, then this is going to be a miserable existence, because the day is going to come when I'm not seeing 300 people a week for one reason or another.
Right.
And I don't ever plan on retiring. I want to take care of people the rest of my life, but the day is going to come when that's taken away from me. The day is going to come when my life is taken away from me.
Right.
And so is the happiness of my being that goes beyond this life, is it dependent on me being a chiropractor that sees 300 people a week? If it is, then I'm screwed. And that can go across the board to being, like I said, to being a father, to being a husband, to being a son, a brother, a friend. These are all labels. These are all standards that we put on ourselves. These are all conditions that we put on ourselves, the ways that we measure ourselves. And when you do that, when you have these standards, when you measure yourself by that, by those labels, there are going to be times when you are unhappy. Now, the great side of it is it makes you take inventory on who you are as a being. I think that's how we evolve through this life, is because we have this ego that we get attached to these things. And so through that, these highs and lows, it really makes us pay more attention to ourselves, and through that process, learn more about ourselves. And I think that's probably, I don't know, I'm no sage, but I would guess that is the whole reason for this physical experience, is the fact that we are going to evolve and know ourselves better through these experiences of highs and lows, through these attachments that we have each and every day, each and every moment.
Right.
Even in this moment, I'm completely attached to the fact that, do people understand what I'm saying? Do people care? Like, how many people turned this podcast off 5 minutes ago because they're sick of listening to me?
Right.
And so, we have these attachments each and every moment.
Yeah.
And that's part of this existence. That's not wrong.
Yeah.
No, by no means is that wrong, but just understanding the fact that is not our true being. That is not our true essence. That is not serving who we are, other than the fact that it's showing us a way to understand ourselves better.
Right. And that's where the growth comes from, though. I love that you bring that up, because you have those highs and those lows and those judgments, and then it's the awareness of those and what's happening, and noticing the attachments, and then processing through that. That's how we evolve. And the more you do that, the more you evolve, and the more reflection, I think, and oversight of your life and what's happening, then that's just how the evolution process can happen so quickly. But like you said, maybe the attachment of 250, 300 plus people a week, like that has been happening for so long that hasn't been taken away from you, and it's so long. So however, 10, 15 years of doing that, and then it got taken away from you, I imagine that source of suffering can take longer to process because of how long it was happening without reflection, maybe. But it seems like you've done enough of this work that it didn't crush you for very long at all.
Yeah, and that's probably the first time I disagree with you, is when you use the word suffering, because it was painful.
Yeah.
Going from 300 to 200 was painful
and
stressful. And I had a lot of conversations with my family about this because they saw it wearing on my face. But what I hope and I believe is that I recognized what I was going through and did a lot of self-reflection on it and self-awareness. And because of that, I've actually done a really good job of letting go of it. And because of that, it's not turning into suffering. Suffering is a long-term attachment to a painful situation. And because of the 45 years of inner reflection that I've done, and where it's led me, I think I've gotten to a place where I am able to adapt to these situations and recognize it for what it is, and recognize that this is a very painful situation, but it doesn't have to be a suffering. And through that, I have been able to let go of some of those standards I put on myself, some of those labels, those judgments I put on myself, and started to turn the corner and become happier. And guess what? All of a sudden, I'm starting to see more people. And I think the longer I would have suffered staying attached to that, I probably would have started not only to either stay the same, I probably would start to see less people, because all of a sudden I wouldn't be showing up as that healthy, authentic version of myself that people enjoy so much. But by letting go of it and getting back to being who I am, being my true essence, people are then attracted to me again, not because I'm high influencing, high expression, but because they're attracted to the person that I am, or the caregiver that I am. And all of a sudden now people are starting to come back around and my numbers are going back up. And so then the tricky part is not loving myself because my numbers are going back up, but because I am true to myself and recognize what I just went through, and that's not me. That's not a reflection of my worth. my worth goes beyond that.
And that's a really good distinction of the pain and the suffering, because you experienced the pain and acknowledged it and then did the work to process it and notice the attachments and and letting it go, and then get right back on the path. It is when, if you didn't acknowledge it, or maybe, there was pain, but you didn't have the strategy of processing it and looking at the attachments and connecting back to your true being, like, you're right. And like, someone in your shoes could have suffered for a long period of time because they were so attached to what was. And that is probably such a huge point, because this can happen all the time. And if you can just notice pain for what it is, as being such a great teacher, and then just use that to reflect and to process and notice the attachments and see where your happiness is being attached to certain outcomes. It's such a powerful process in developing and evolving who you are.
You made a great point right there, great distinction, because pain serves us. In my opinion, pain serves us. Physical pain, mental pain, chemical pain. It's just awareness. Pain puts awareness on what needs to be paid attention to. But suffering is a completely different animal. Suffering is not listening to the pain. It's ignoring the pain, ignoring the awareness.
Numbing the pain.
Yeah, and not paying attention to what the pain's trying to show you, and therefore staying stuck in a pattern, staying stuck in a story, being stuck in something that you believe serves you, even though it has a negative effect on your life. It's serving you. When you're suffering, there's something behind that you are using as a crutch.
Right.
And until you pay attention to it and move past it, then it's always going to hold you back from being the best version of yourself. And so pain's the opposite of that. Pain is bringing you awareness. Suffering is being stuck to not having awareness of what the pain was trying to show you.
Exactly. And that's the powerful thing about habits, right? Like, your habit of noticing pain and reflecting on it is so strong, where the habit of not doing that and maybe allowing these circumstances to kind of just blow you which way, up and down, and like, that becomes a habit. And the longer you do that, I imagine it's harder and harder to come out of it. And that's why it's so important to have some version of this process. So I think that constantly be checking in and building that habit of noticing pain and using it as a teacher to pay attention. And then, like, 'cause you're going to have pain your whole life. Like, there's going to be painful moments constantly, and that they're partially there to help you evolve. So building that habit of having this process in place, I think, is a key element for people to evolve into their truest expression.
And the less you pay attention to the pain, the louder it gets.
Mm-hmm.
I really think, I have not taken a symptom relieving drug in almost 30 years now. I was a sophomore in high school, 16 years old, when I made the decision to never take a symptom relieving drug again. And I think because of that, I don't experience excruciating pain. I don't experience excruciating symptoms because I listen to them. I do what they're telling me to do. And because of that, I don't need to numb them. I can adapt to them. But if you constantly numb them all the time and don't pay attention to them, then they start knocking louder, or they start screaming louder. It starts out as a whisper, and then it becomes a conversation, and it turns into screaming and yelling and shouting, and it gets angrier and angrier until you finally listen to it. And so you can use, if you talk about physical pain, you can use drugs to keep it at bay for a short period of time, but your body's going to scream at you over and over and over again beyond those drugs, through the earmuffs of those drugs, until you listen to it. And it's the same thing with mental pain, same thing with spiritual pain. If you don't listen to it, if you don't pay attention, if you don't do what it's asking you to do, pay attention to what it's asking you to pay attention to, it's just going to keep getting louder and louder and louder and cause more and more suffering.
Yeah, well said, man. Well said. It's really empowering, I think, to take on that viewpoint of just being present, so you can listen to these subtle whispers as soon as they come up. And again, I think those times by yourself, whether it's meditation or walking or just connecting, those whispers can be really clear. And when life is so all these moving pieces are happening all of the time and you're not taking time to check in, like it can be a while for you to hear it because it's yelling and screaming by this point, when if you would have taken time to check in, like you'd hear the subtle whisper right when something needs to be addressed. Okay, one of my favorite questions, man. Moving forward, at this point, 20-ish years into the game, what are you most excited about as it relates to your art, your life expression, your being?
Evolutionary care. That's what I'm really most excited about. One thing I've really learned through the last couple of years, and actually you've helped me to recognize this, is the fact that chiropractic is so powerful. However, there is so much more that we can use chiropractic for to help people to evolve. And really, probably, I've always been really interested in nutrition, something that was a big deal to me when I was younger, especially. I've always paid a lot of attention to what I was putting in my body. It's always been front end. And then, physically, I mentioned, not taking drugs. I've always been really aware of where my body is doing physically, making sure I was giving my body the proper recuperation time when it was sending me pain signals. But what I've really started to focus on is more on the mental and spiritual side of my life. And it's something that started a long time ago. I mean, my mom turned me on to spiritual books when I was into my high school career and in beginning of college. And so I had an awareness, but I didn't really bring it into chiropractic until more recently. And now it has become a huge passion of mine. You already mentioned the fact that we're doing the podcast on spirituality together, which has been one of the things that I have enjoyed most recently as far as doing. If you're talking about what I've been doing recently that I love, that spirituality podcast has meant so much to me because it's given me a form of expression, a form of creativity around spirituality, which has brought me a lot of understanding about my own spiritual health. But I really believe that our society, our world as a whole, suffers from a chronic mental illness, which stems from a disconnect from our true being. I really feel like there's a lack of self-love in this world, especially unconditional love. And I think that permeates across the board and turns into a lot of physical, mental, chemical pain as as our body, our spirit really whispers to us and is now screaming at us to make changes and to love ourselves. And when you look around us in this divisive world that we live in, I really believe that divisiveness comes from a lack of self-love. And so we're really looking for people to validate who we are, to fill us up, to make us love ourselves more. So we try to find people who think the way we think, act the way that we act, do the way we do, to validate us, to make us feel better about ourselves, so that we value ourselves better because we have these standards that are all external. Whereas if we love ourselves more, especially unconditionally, there's no need for the divisiveness. You can encounter somebody who's different from you and love and respect them for who they are and understand them for who they are without the need to have them validate you or make you right. You being right comes from a need to be around somebody who's like you. Right. So in order for you to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. And that's what creates division. But if you love yourself and don't hold yourself to those standards, now you don't need to be right. And so then the other person that you encounter doesn't have to be wrong. So it takes down that divisive wall between you. And, you mentioned Strength Finder, which is a beautiful tool for helping you to understand where somebody else is coming from. It's a language, in my opinion. It's a way to communicate about some of the innate qualities that somebody has in them. And so what I'm really excited about is starting to utilize that more in my practice. And I've just started honing my skills with some of the team members and now expanding into the doctors. And I'm really looking forward to the day when I can expand this more with the patients as well, so that through chiropractic and this beautiful thing that is chiropractic and us helping people to connect to their innate. I also want to be able to improve them on all 4 pillars of health. Helping them to understand more about how to eat well, how to move well, how to recuperate well. But then the part that I really love is that think well piece. And I've never really had the tools until just recently to know how to express that to people. But through our podcast, the Spirituality Podcast, through the Beacon podcast that you've brought into my life, and now through Strength Finder, I've really found these avenues of how I believe that I can now actually start to communicate with people on a level, express to people on a level that helps them to experience more spiritual and or mental health, which I feel like is probably the number one thing that's affecting our world right now.
Yeah, definitely. And even as your awareness shifts so heavily into kind of this spiritual evolution with people, I think that will definitely be influenced even with your adjusting with people, even in your interactions with people, as that becomes like on the top of your focus and your awareness. I think that is one of those things that you can't measure, right, necessarily, but I think that's where you really people start to have even bigger experiences with the adjustment, because the intention behind the adjustment can be facilitated from such a different level of presence. And bringing in all these different tools, I think it's going to be super exciting to see.
You're exactly right. What you just said was right on point. It's more about the being rather than the doing. So I just went to a place of doing with everything that I was expressing, but you're right. It's who you are in that adjusting room with that person. And so when your intention is on this thing that I think is so important, which is advancing, spiritual health, when you have that intention, it changes your being. And in that 3 minutes, you may not have time to go through Strength Finder with them, but you can be a better version of you and have a better intention. And that comes through you when you're doing the adjustment. And you're absolutely right. That is the form of evolutionary care right there. And it's going to change the conversations you're going to have. It's going to change the interaction you have. It's going to change the connection you have.
The trust level that they have with you.
Trust, exactly. And it comes down to that. The connection and trust, that's everything. And so to help your patient evolve to a different level, you have to take yourself to a higher level. And so I think you brought up a great point, which I missed in my conversation I was just having a few minutes ago, which is it's really about being a better version of me, being more connected to me and my spiritual being, and that coming through me as my doing, which is the chiropractor. And that's what the person is experiencing is the doing from a place of me being better connected to my being.
Yeah. And I think when that interaction is taking place, then like these different avenues and these different conversations, and they all become possible. Because again, going back to that connection and trust, like to go there with somebody, like there has to be a high level of trust. And I think these different avenues of the Spirituality Podcast and Strengths Finders, like it will emanate from you, and then they will have this trust for you to take them there in a place where so many people are scared to even dive into, like, or it's been so, convoluted, right? In an area that is so powerful and so crucial on a needs level to live our best life. So that type of evolutionary care is exciting, man.
And trust comes from caring, and I'm throwing this word out there again, unconditional caring. The person senses if you do really care about making them better, or do you want to make your bottom line better. And then going back to what you were saying about being a better version of yourself, if your intention is this mental and spiritual awareness and improvement and advancement, that's going to come across in that unconditional caring, and they're going to get that sense that they're being cared for on that level, and that's going to help elevate them.
Totally. Okay, brother. Let's got a time for probably one or two quick fire round questions. Let's see. What about resources and books? I know we already kind of talked about like those weren't really influential, in your journey. Like so much of it was more introspective and just that internal journey. But was there any resources or books that you're like, that definitely was a catalyst for a perspective shift for you?
Yeah, there were two books way back in the day, going back to college, really, that kind of set a foundation for, at least for the spiritual evolvement that I've had recently, and that was Illusions by Richard Bach and Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Those are two books that I read over and over again and really helped kind of guide me in my path towards inner improvement. And then more recently, it's actually not a super recent book, but it's a book that I just, over the last 3 years, I've actually probably listened to 28 times, I'm guessing. But it's by Deepak Chopra. It's the Ultimate Prescription for Happiness, or the Ultimate Happiness Prescription, one of those three. But I've never read the book. I love Deepak's voice, and so oftentimes on my walk, I'll throw that book on and I'll just listen to him over and over and over again, and I get so much out of his words and his intention and his tone. That's why I would recommend anybody that wants that book, don't read it. Don't waste your time reading it. Listen to it. Listen to the words coming from Deepak narrate that book. It's really powerful.
Just recently, I was listening to someone talk with the perspective that I haven't really heard before, and they were just like, I don't really read a ton of books. I've found a couple that I have gone all in on and just learned the principles, and I don't need to keep reading. And that's just crazy that you've got about 3 books here that you've gone so deep in and like pulled out the principles and just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper, which is just another expression of who you are, because you go so deep with people on, so it's, again, really cool to hear that process and how those books have influenced you and how you've gone about them.
And again, I think it goes back to how we started this whole conversation about being true to yourself.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a very simple person, and I got to keep things simple. I don't want a ton of information rattling around in my head. So once I do find some things that I'm really drawn to, I just want to understand them deeper. But then I know you really well, and you're somebody who loves information and really innately is drawn to and motivated to learning as much as you possibly can. And you want to get as much as you can out of knowledge and wisdom in life. And, lean into that. I'm going to lean into being simple, the simple me, but you should lean into being the complicated you. And anybody who's listening to this, you should just lean into whatever you're drawn to too. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. There's only your way. And you just have to, in my opinion, take the time to connect to that, figure out what that is, and then stay in your lane. Be true to yourself. And I think one of the best ways to recognize that is, if you're doing something that's exhausting to you, then you're probably not being true to your innate being. If you're doing something that energizes you, that's something that's innately who you are. And if you just follow that general rule of thumb, I think it helps guide you towards understanding yourself better and then doing the things that feed your being. Yeah.
That's something that I've really recently, really learned from you that I haven't thought about in a while is, where am I getting exhausted from what activities, and letting that again be a source of maybe pain that I can learn from, and reflect on where maybe I'm not staying true to myself, and letting my energy be the what I'm reflecting on. So that's really, really cool that I'm going to start adding in more, because there's times that I'm tired. I'm like, oh, that's just, I'm working hard, doing a lot of things, and that's just what's going to happen. I'm going to be tired. Versus like, okay, where are some of those activities not being true to who I am, and they're drawing an exponential amount of energy from me. Whereas if you go throughout your week and you're mostly living from a place of being, and your authentic self, then you should continue to be energized.
Yeah, think about the word dis-ease, right?
Right.
Dis-ease is anything that takes you out of ease or easy, or things that you're drawn to doing. And if you are constantly doing things that take you out of a state of ease, out of a state of balance, out of a state of harmony, that's going to make you be quote unquote sick. Your body's going to start sending you symptoms. It's going to start pain. It's going to start knocking. It's going to start whispering. It's going to start talking, start yelling, right? All those things. And then if you don't listen to it and you keep doing those things that exhaust you, keep doing those things that take you out of ease, it's going to turn into a disease, because you're going to start to break down. Yep. And so you really have to find those things that bring you joy, bring you peace, that are easy for you to innately do. and live your life in those moments. Certainly challenge yourself.
Right.
You know, there's a place for fight or flight. You know,
Yeah.
fight or flight is a great way to evolve. It takes us out of that place of balance and gives us the opportunity to look at ourselves and reflect and get better at adapting. And adaption's how we get back into balance. But you don't want to live in those states. And if you live in fight or flight, eventually you're going to break down. You want to live in parasympathetic, not in sympathetic. And parasympathetic lives in ease. When you find the things that fill you up, fulfill you, make you feel happy, make you feel joyful, make you feel peaceful, live in that area, and then experience the extremes for sure, and to learn, adapt, evolve, but then learn from them and how to quickly get back into the place of ease.
Right. Well said, man. This has been an awesome conversation, Dr. Rick, and I'm so excited that we finally got this one in the books. It's crazy to think that, our relationship started back when I was 15 years old. And just to seeing it evolve, I've been just so grateful for the mentorship, the friendship, getting to learn from you. And the support when I was going through school, the couple little lessons, specifically, like let me know that I have my entire life to become the chiropractor that, I have aspirations and dreams of becoming, that I didn't have to do it all at one time. That was hugely beneficial to me, and just having you as that mentor and that friend over these years has been just awesome, and I'm so grateful.
And let me just say that you're already that chiropractor. The only thing that's getting in the way is you not believing that and knowing that yet, but it's already there. And I just want to say I am sitting here and I'm a bit emotional because I've got to share this time with you and gotten the opportunity to watch you become the being that you are, the man that you are, the chiropractor that you are. And I couldn't be more excited to watch you shed those layers of doubt and uncertainty and let that inner being be a full expression of who you are. Because if you want to value life on doing, the amount of doing that you've done in such a short period of time is just miraculous, so far beyond anywhere that I ever was at your age. And so I just sit here in awe and wonder of where this is going to end up. But I appreciate you being grateful of me, but I am equally, if not more, grateful the fact that you've allowed me to be your mentor and to be connected to you the way I am. I love you so much, and I'm so happy to be a part of your life, and I'm so excited that we get to continue this journey together.
I love you too, brother. And yeah, the journey continues to go, and I'm so excited as well. For our listeners, I will put the resources in the show notes, and I'll talk to you about maybe how they could get a hold of you. You're not on social media anywhere, so maybe an email, but that'll be in the show notes if we do that. But thank you again, man, for being here. This is rad.
Yeah, and you're right. Email is great, but if anyone ever wants to come out here and visit us, that's when I shine.
Yeah,
face to face. I'm not great over the phone. I'm happy to text. I'm not on social media. I love face-to-face interaction. So if there's any chiropractors out there that are drawn to wanting to come in and see what we've created here, just come on out. We'd love to have you. We welcome you with open arms.
Cool. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
All right, TAC listeners, if you enjoy this one, head over to iTunes or Stitcher so you can subscribe to the podcast and get an automatic download of our newest episode each and every week. While you're at it, we would love a review, a comment, a rating, anything that will allow us to reach more docs and more students and continue to raise the bar in chiropractic performance training. If you haven't yet checked out the artfulchiropractor.com, you can do that for show notes for this episode and previous ones, along with any of the resources that our docs are dropping. And if you haven't yet checked out the Kairos Training Culture Community Facebook page, you have to get there, send a request with a message of who you are and why you want to be a part of the group, because there are so many amazing golden nuggets that are being dropped every single day that are elevating the chiropractic performance game. So with that, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week as always, and until next time, peace.